Hey everybody. So for our next unit, we're going to start looking at a really exciting area in computer science right now, and that is machine learning. Part of the reason why I'm really excited to explore this with you is that right now there are some amazing tools available to you that you're going to be able to play around with as part of this class, and so you're going to get an understanding of how machine learning works, a little bit about how you use a machine learning algorithm, and you're going to do some practical applications of machine learning to try to build some things that use it. Let's get started. So the first thing I want to show you is I've decided that in this weird world that we live in, I have given up in really being able to track time. I'm just really bad at it. I don't necessarily realize what time of day it is without looking at a clock. It's been really hard to tell. And so one thing that has been really important for staying healthy during this time has been healthy eating. And so I've tried really hard to eat in a healthy way. And so as part of this made-up situation, I guess, that I'm putting together for the purpose of this, what I'd like to talk about is how we might use machine learning to help me identify if there's a meal in front of me. Is this breakfast? Is it lunch? Is it dinner? Now, the reason I'm saying this is a really good machine learning introduction is that it's not something I think I could easily teach a computer to do really easily. I don't think I could tell a computer that if something is breakfast, it has eggs and it has bacon, or maybe there's fruit. I don't know that I could really do that. I think it would be much easier to kind of tell somebody, well, here are some examples of breakfast and what it looks like. Here are some examples of lunch and what it looks like. And here's some pictures of dinner. And from these, maybe a person would be able to say, okay, based on those examples, I think I have a good understanding of what you think breakfast, lunch, and dinner are. So I'm going to try and follow those rules in order to help you with this task moving forward. So you could imagine telling a person how to do this with examples, or maybe a child how to do this with examples. Machine learning works a lot like this. With machine learning algorithms, you give a machine learning algorithm examples of what you want it to be able to do. And then, based on that, you then train it on those examples, and then you see how well it has done. So this is my idea with the machine learning algorithm. We're going to be using something called an image classifier. And we're going to be using it to try to figure out what meal something is based purely on the picture. And so these three stages that I've shown you here are really the stages of trying to implement a machine learning algorithm. First thing is you have to collect a whole bunch of data that describes the pairings of the images and what you categorize or classify those images as. And so that's going to be the first thing that we're going to take a look at today through the tasks. The second thing is to actually train the algorithm to figure out, based on these examples and these classifications, the algorithm is able to figure out what are the things that are really hard to define, perhaps in a computer program, that it can find in common with all of the examples that you give it, so that maybe it can then go and, given some source data, try to identify what something is based on the image itself. And so the third stage is this evaluate stage, where you want to see how well your trained algorithm actually does. And so we're going to go through this entire process with this image classifier. So what I did is I went onto a Creative Commons image website, and I'll share that with you for class. And I just started looking for images of breakfast, the sorts of things that I thought looked like breakfast in the images that came up, and I started collecting them. So here are 6 examples that you can, I don't know, for me they look like breakfast. Your breakfast may look very different from mine, and so that's an issue we're going to start talking about a little bit later on, about bias in data sets, but that's for later. So I picked some examples, and I just did a search for breakfast, lunch, and I found some dinner as well. And so this is how I did it within the Creative Commons website. And you can do this with Creative Commons. You can do it with other sources. The reason I'm doing this with Creative Commons images is that I want the images I use to be, I want people to have given their permission for me to use these images for something, for it's kind of hard to say this purpose because it's not really defined right now. As saying, I give you permission to use my images in a machine learning algorithm. But I feel a little bit better about saying that if I'm using images that people have given permission to share and reuse and do things with, that it's a little bit better than perhaps just going to Google image search. I'm not going to place that restriction on you. I'm going to say try to do that if you can. But for the purposes of just learning, it's going to be okay to go either route. So this is how I found some lunch images. And I also had to clearly define what my categories are going to be. So I want to define images as being a meal that is breakfast or lunch or dinner. There are some foods that might belong in multiple categories. There was one time when we decided as a family to do breakfast for dinner. So we had pancakes and eggs for dinner. We're not looking for anything complicated like that. I'm just saying these foods I am defining to be breakfast, these are lunch, and these are dinner. And those are the ones that I'm going to try to use. And so what I then had to do was I had to take each of the pictures that I had captured and I had to sort them as being breakfast or lunch or dinner. Now, again, there are some crossover ones. That doesn't really matter. I am going to, for the simplicity of this project, say that any piece of food is going to be one of those three categories. And so that's what I've done here. There's one other thing that I want to kind of define here because we want to think ahead at the end. And I'm trying to teach you a little bit about how data scientists and machine learning experts go through the process of training an algorithm. So I want to define two things. One is training data, which is the set of classified examples that we are giving the machine learning algorithm in the beginning to learn from. But there's another set, and that is testing data. So this is a set of sorted images like the ones that we use for training, but these images are only used for testing. So in the end, there are a set of images that we don't want to use in the training data. We want to use in the end to see how well our algorithm has learned the examples that we've taught it. So we train the algorithm on the training data, and then once we've trained, we're going to try to evaluate our model using our testing data. Now, when you're doing machine learning, you want, ideally, a huge data set. Really, the bigger the data set, the better. For our purposes, I'm not forcing you to do anything too big. But generally, you want to try to have a lot of examples of each category in your training set so that the machine learning algorithm can really learn from those examples. The more examples you give it, the better. Just like people. I mean, you're all students. If your math teacher just gives you 10 problems and says, all right, that's it. Now I'm going to give you the test. You're not really sure necessarily of how good you're going to do on that test if you've only seen 10 problems. The more experience you have, the more examples you have, the better you're going to be at identifying what you need to do in each situation. And so machine learning is the same. The other thing that machine learning experts tend to use as a rule of thumb is that you have a data set of a whole bunch of categorized images and categories. You save 80% of that data set for training and about 20% of that data set for testing. So if you have 100 pictures, you want to use around 80 of those pictures for training and 20 you save for testing. And I'm going to have you follow that rule as you get started. So here's what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to be doing this with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You can do the same. You could try generating your own set for that one, or you could find something that maybe for you is a little more interesting as opposed to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you come up with an idea for a set of images and categories. We're going to keep it simple. I would say you want to use up to 3. 2 is fine, 3 is fine. 1 category. I mean, one thing you could do is say that something is breakfast or is not breakfast, if you wanted to simplify what I'm doing with the meal classifier problem. But I'm looking for you to identify something that you want to investigate. And I want you to collect images, and these should be images in ideally screenshots are fine. So .png is ideal. .png, you could take pictures as well, but if you are taking pictures with your phone, you ultimately want to make sure that those images turn into .png files, because it's going to be easier training our systems on those. So you want to have a training set of 60 images, 60 pictures, get them from wherever you want. And then you want to also get a testing set of 15 images. And you want to classify each of those examples as being your categories. So I'm going to get 20 breakfast, 20 lunch, 20 dinner. And I'm also going to have for my testing set 5 breakfast, 5 lunch, and 5 dinner. And those are all going to be different images. I don't want any repetition. The other thing that you want to try to do in your data set is have it be balanced. So you want to have about an equal number of breakfast, equal number of dinner, equal number of lunch in both your testing set and your training set, so that it's not too biased. You have enough examples of each one. So you're going to collect those screenshots. You're going to organize them the way I've shown you on the screen here. And then ultimately you're going to take that directory, you're going to upload it to Google Drive, and then you're going to share that directory with me. If you would like to work with someone else in the classroom to generate perhaps a larger data set, maybe you want to collaborate, and instead of doing the 75, you want to collaborate with someone and say, you find 75, I'll find 75, and then we'll combine. That's going to lead to an even bigger data set. If you want to do that, that's great. Just let me know who you're working with, what your categories are, and ultimately share those directories with me. And that's all I'm asking you to do for today. And we're going to get to the next step of actually training our model in our next video. So with that, I hope you have some fun getting images and getting them together. Let's get to work. Thanks, everybody.